What if I told you that the cozy image of a Victorian home we know from books and movies hides a place where heat, smoke, and constant labor reigned? The romantic image of a 19th century kitchen with copper pots, bread rising, and neatly folded towels is just a soft shell covering a much harsher reality. Behind this picture, people who provided comfort for the whole house at the expense of their own health faced fire, soot, and endless cooking. The Victorian kitchen was a veritable industrial zone. It was a world where everything depended on coal and human endurance, and warmth meant not comfort, but almost exhausting heat. Here the fire crackled, greasy soot dripped, frying pans weighed as much as today's weights, and every pot required strength just to lift it. The space that seems homely and peaceful to us was in fact more like a small factory working non-stop. The air in such kitchens was thick. A mixture of smoke, aromas, steam, and hot metal created an atmosphere in which breathing was a challenge. There was no romance, only the clanging of cast iron, the noise of opening ovens, and the rhythm of hard work. Every dish that made it to the dining room table cost not only time, but also the physical strength, dexterity, and patience of those who worked downstairs, far from the formal interiors. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why the Victorian kitchen was both the heart of the home and its most dangerous place, what hidden dangers lurked within its scorching walls, and how much a typical pot, which a servant handled dozens of times a day, actually weighed. I'm going to let you in on a secret that will forever change your perception of old kitchens. The main character and, at the same time, the main villain of the Victorian kitchen was not the hostess, but the cast iron stove, or kitchen hearth. It was not just a cooking device, but a massive cast iron monster that dictated the entire rhythm of life on the lower floor. It was the heart of the home, but a hot, demanding, and incredibly dirty heart. Operating this unit was a real art, requiring not only skill but also enormous physical strength. It rarely cooled down, maintaining a constant heat that made the kitchen the warmest and, in summer, the most unbearable place in the house. This cast iron tyrant ran exclusively on coal. Forget about simply turning a knob, as on a modern gas stove. Every morning began with hard work, lighting the fire. It was a whole ritual that required kindling, proper coal stacking, and constant supervision. Servants had to carry heavy sacks of coal from the basement, which was an exhausting task in itself. The lighting process created a huge amount of dust and soot, which immediately settled on all surfaces, turning cleaning into an endless cycle. The smell of a Victorian kitchen was largely determined by the stove. It was a complex mixture of aromas. First and foremost, there was the constant, slightly sulfurous smell of burning coal and soot. This was mixed with the metallic smell of red-hot cast iron. Only then did the aromas of cooking food break through the smoky veil. Baking bread, frying meat, or boiling broth. This smoky note was an integral part of any dish cooked on such a stove. The stove was not only a source of heat for cooking, but also hot water for the entire house. It often had a special boiler built into it, which heated water for washing dishes and, in wealthy homes, for the owner's baths. This meant that the fire in the stove had to burn almost constantly, from early morning until late at night. Maintaining the fire at the right level was a headache in itself. Too weak and the water would not heat up. Too strong and the food would burn. Regulating the temperature was a real science. There were no thermostats. The cook had to intuitively feel his stove, knowing which part of the oven was hotter and which was cooler. The temperature was controlled by a system of dampers and draft regulators that opened or closed the air supply. To check the heat in the oven, the cook could throw a piece of paper inside and see how quickly it darkened, or simply stick his hand inside, risking a burn. In addition to the oven and hob, stoves often had additional compartments. For example, there was a special cabinet for warming plates so that the food served to the host would not get cold. There were also compartments for drying herbs or keeping dishes warm. It was a multifunctional appliance, but it ran on the rough and dirty power of coal. Every part of it required care, cleaning, and attention. Cleaning the stove was perhaps the dirtiest job in the kitchen. It had to be done every day. The stove, which had cooled down overnight, was completely cleaned of ash and burnt coal. Then its cast iron surface was polished to a shine with a special wax, or blacking, a thick black paste based on graphite. This process was dirty, leaving stains on hands and clothes, but it was absolutely necessary to keep the stove in working order and looking decent. Soot was the main enemy. It accumulated not only on the surface of the stove, but also in the chimneys. A clogged chimney could lead to poor draft, smoke in the kitchen, or even a fire. Therefore, regular cleaning of chimneys was vital. It was hard and dangerous work, but without it, the whole system would simply cease to function. The Victorian kitchen was literally built around this fire-breathing, soot-covered centerpiece. The stove itself was a status symbol. The larger and more complex the kitchen hearth, the richer the house was considered to be. In large mansions, stoves could take up an entire wall, with multiple ovens, water boilers, and numerous burners. They were the pinnacle of engineering of their time, but in exchange for their capabilities, they demanded constant sacrifices in the form of hard labor and coal. Life in the kitchen revolved around the stove's schedule. The morning lighting dictated the servants' wake-up time. The need to maintain the fire meant that someone had to be in the kitchen at all times. Evening cleaning completed the long working day. The stove was a relentless boss who never slept and always demanded attention. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think you could manage such a monster without a single thermostat or button, relying solely on your intuition? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more stories about the past. Are you ready to learn the truth about who really ruled the Victorian home? At least the lower part of it? The kitchen was not just a room, but a whole world with its own strict hierarchy. It was a state within a state, and at its head was the queen, the cook, or in large houses, the mistress, even if she was not married. Her authority was unquestionable, and her word was law for everyone on her territory. She was not just a cook, but a manager, accountant, and artist all rolled into one. Mrs. was responsible for everything from planning the weekly menu to ordering groceries and controlling expenses. She had the keys to the pantries where the most valuable supplies were stored: sugar, tea, spices. She was in charge of complex recipes, often passed down from generation to generation or recorded in her personal grease-stained cookbook. The reputation of the entire household depended on her skill and mood, as the quality of the food was one of the main indicators of the owner's status. An entire army of assistants worked under her. In an average house, this could be a single kitchen maid who did all the dirty work. In wealthy mansions, the staff was huge. There were assistant cooks responsible for vegetables, fish, or meat. There was a separate maid responsible for pastries. And at the bottom of the hierarchy was the dishwasher, who did the dirtiest and hardest work. The working day in a Victorian kitchen began long before dawn. The dishwasher or junior maid got up at 5 or even 4 in the morning. Her first task was to light the cast iron stove. Then began an endless cycle, bringing coal, bringing water, cleaning vegetables, washing pots. This work was physically exhausting and continued almost without interruption until late at night. A strict hierarchy was evident in everything. Junior servants were not allowed to sit in the presence of their superiors. They ate what was left over after the meal of the masters and senior servants. They had virtually no personal time. Any mistake, whether it was a broken plate or burnt porridge, could cost them their job, which at that time was tantamount to disaster. Clothing was also strictly regulated. Simple, durable cotton dresses, large aprons, and bonnets were not for beauty, but for practicality. Clothes had to be clean, despite the constant dirt, soot, and grease. Washing these uniforms was a separate, difficult task, which was usually done on a designated day and required boiling the laundry in huge cauldrons. Despite the harsh conditions, for many girls, working in the kitchen was their only chance for a better life. It was an opportunity to learn a trade and get stable housing and food. The most talented and hardworking could eventually move up the career ladder, going from dishwasher to assistant cook, and perhaps even to cook. It was a harsh school of life, but it provided a profession. The cook, in turn, was the link between the lower and upper worlds. She communicated with the lady of the house, discussing the menu and budget. She dealt with the merchants who brought in the food. This gave her a certain amount of power and privilege, but also imposed a huge responsibility. A failed dinner party could cost her the reputation she had earned over the years. Communication between staff members was strictly regulated. Familiarity was not encouraged. However, in this closed world, where people worked and lived side by side for 16 hours a day, relationships, friendships, and rivalries inevitably arose. The kitchen was not only a workplace, but also a social center for the servants. This whole complex system was built on endurance and discipline. It was as well-oiled as a clockwork mechanism where every cog knew its place. This army of servants ensured the smooth running of the domestic factory. But what if I told you that the main enemy of this army was not the wrath of the mistress, but simple physics? Are you ready to find out how much the chef's main tool weighed and why working in the kitchen required the strength of a porter? What I am about to tell you is something you would hardly ever imagine when thinking about cooking. We are used to lightweight aluminum pans and pots with non-stick coatings. A Victorian cook could not have dreamed of such things. Her arsenal consisted of cast iron and copper, metals that are heavy, demanding, but practically eternal. And this arsenal required not only culinary talent, but also extraordinary physical strength. Cast iron was the main material used for everyday cookware. Huge pots for soups and broths, frying pans, baking tins, all of these were made from thick, heavy cast iron. This metal was ideal for coal stoves. It heated slowly, but distributed heat evenly and retained it for a long time. This was critically important when the source of fire was so unstable. Now imagine the weight of this cookware. A large cast iron pot, or cauldron, weighed several kilograms on its own. Now fill it with several gallons of water or soup. The weight became unbearable. 2 junior maids had to drag such cauldrons from the stove to the cutting table. One awkward movement and the heavy cauldron of boiling water could cause terrible injuries. Cleaning cast iron was a science in itself. There were no modern detergents. Cast iron cookware could not simply be soaked. It had to be scraped with sand, ash, or special metal scrapers to remove burnt-on food residue. After washing, it had to be wiped dry immediately and often greased to prevent rust. It was a daily, dirty, and laborious process. Copper cookware was the pride of the kitchen. In wealthy homes, entire walls were hung with shiny copper pots, saucepans, and jelly molds. Copper was valued for its excellent heat conductivity. It heated quickly and evenly, which was ideal for making sauces and confections. It was cookware for true culinary art, and cooks were very proud of it. However, copper also had a dark secret. When it came into contact with acidic foods, copper could oxidize, releasing toxic substances. To avoid this, all copper cookware was coated with a layer of tin on the inside, i.e., tinned. This layer wore out over time and had to be regularly restored. This was a job for a special tinsmith, and until he arrived, the cookware became dangerous. Cleaning copper was a symbol of the status of the kitchen. Shiny copper was the pride of the hostess and a headache for the servants. Copper tarnished at the slightest touch or moisture. It had to be polished to a shine every day. For this purpose, abrasive mixtures were used, often homemade, for example from vinegar, salt, and sand. This work required hours of monotonous labor, but the result was worth it. The kitchen shone like a jewelry store. In addition to cast iron and copper, there were countless specialized tools. Each dish had its own utensil. Heavy marble mortars and pestles, which were used to grind spices or sugar for hours. Massive wooden boards for cutting meat, which had to be scraped with a knife. Metal skewers for roasting meat over an open fire, which were initially rotated by hand. Imagine the process of making simple mashed potatoes. There were no blenders or electric mixers. Potatoes were boiled in a heavy cast iron pot. Then the water was drained, which was not easy in itself. After that, the cook used a massive wooden pestle or a special press to mash the vegetables. All this required physical effort, time, and endurance. Even simple cutlery required care. The silverware served to the host had to be cleaned regularly to prevent it from tarnishing. Special powders and pastes were used for this purpose. This was another monotonous but necessary task that fell on the shoulders of the junior servants. Every spoon and fork had to sparkle. This emphasis on weight and physical labor determined who could work in the kitchen. It was not a job for the weak. Constantly carrying heavy loads, working on your feet for 16 hours a day, the heat from the stove, all this required incredible endurance. The Victorian kitchen was not a place for delicate ladies, but a real workshop where brute strength was valued. If you are also impressed by the incredible endurance required for simple cooking, don't forget to like this video. What if I told you that a simple glass of clean water in a Victorian kitchen was not a given, but the result of hard work? We turn on the tap and water flows by itself, hot or cold. In the 19th century, things were different. Running water in homes was rare, available only to the wealthiest, and even then, it was often unreliable. For most kitchens, water was a resource that had to be obtained. The source of water was often a pump or well located in the backyard or in a special washroom. This meant that every bucket of water had to be fetched. And kitchens required an incredible amount of water. Water for drinking, water for cooking, water for washing dishes, water for laundry, water for cleaning. It added up to dozens of gallons a day. This water was carried in buckets. The younger servants, often girls, spent a significant part of their morning filling all the containers in the kitchen. They carried heavy buckets, 2 at a time, sometimes using a special yoke to distribute the weight. It was hard physical labor that began with the first rays of the sun and did not end until evening. But bringing water was only half the battle. For most needs, hot water was required. And here we return to our cast iron stove. It had a built-in water tank that was heated by fire, but this tank had to be constantly refilled by hand. Alternatively, water was heated in huge boilers standing directly on the stove. This added even more steam and humidity to an already stuffy room. Laundry was a separate epic. In wealthy homes, there was a separate room for this, a laundry room, but often it was combined with the kitchen or located nearby. Laundry was a weekly hell. Laundry was boiled in huge copper boilers, or copper pots. This process filled the kitchen with thick, acrid steam from alkali-based soap. It was difficult to breathe in such a room, and visibility dropped to a few meters. After boiling, the laundry was washed by hand on ribbed boards, which required enormous effort. It was then rinsed in several batches of water, each of which had to be brought in and heated. After that, the heavy wet laundry was wrung out, often with the help of hand rollers, and hung up to dry. In bad weather, it was dried right in the kitchen, which further increased the humidity. Washing dishes was also a watery epic. There was no hot water from the tap. In a large sink, often made of stone or lead, there were 3 containers. In one, with hot water and soap, the dishes were washed. In another, with clean hot water, they were rinsed. In the third, with cold water, they were rinsed a final time. All this water had to be brought in, heated and changed several times a day. The quality of the water itself often left much to be desired. Water from wells could be hard, which made washing and cleaning difficult. In cities, water from early water pipes could be cloudy and have an unpleasant taste. Filtration was primitive, if it existed at all. Therefore, cooks preferred to use rainwater, which was collected in special barrels for the most delicate dishes. Disposing of dirty water was another problem. There was no modern sewage system. Dirty, greasy water from washing dishes or floors was simply poured into the backyard or a drainage ditch. This created unpleasant odors and conditions around the house. Thus, water was not just an ingredient, but a constant logistical challenge. Controlling water, its delivery, heating, use, and disposal was one of the key functions of the kitchen. This constant struggle for water took up a tremendous amount of time and energy for the staff. The entire kitchen process was built around this endless circulation of water. It did not flow from the tap, but on the shoulders and in the hands of the servants. Every sip of tea or plate of clean soup was the result of this invisible but incredibly hard work. But where did they store all the food if there were no refrigerators? And how did they prevent it from spoiling? In the next chapter, you will learn the secrets of Victorian pantries. In a world without electric refrigerators, preserving food was a real art and a daily struggle. The Victorian kitchen had a whole arsenal of solutions for this, and the main bastion in this struggle was the pantry, or larder. It was not just a cupboard, but an entire room, designed with intelligence and expertise. It was the heart of storage, as important as the stove was the heart of cooking. The main secret of the pantry was its location. It was always built on the north side of the house, where direct sunlight was least likely to reach it. It had thick walls that helped keep it cool and often had a stone floor. Ventilation was key. Small windows covered with mesh allowed air to circulate but kept out unwanted guests. In the center of the pantry, there was often a massive table or shelf made of stone, usually marble or slate. Thanks to its density, this stone always remained cold. Dairy products, milk in jugs, butter, cheese, were stored on this cold slab. Cooks also left puddings, jellies, and other delicate foods here to cool. It was a natural refrigerator. A wide variety of supplies were stored on shelves along the walls. Flour, sugar, and cereals were stored in large wooden or tin chests to protect them from moisture. Spices, tea, and coffee were kept in tightly closed jars. Smoked hams, sausages, and bundles of dried herbs hung from hooks on the ceiling, spreading a complex, spicy aroma throughout the pantry. However, the coolness of the pantry was not enough for perishable foods, especially meat and fish, and especially in summer. This is where the ice box or ice chest came into play. It was the ancestor of the modern refrigerator. A wooden cabinet, carefully insulated on the inside with sawdust, cork, or even wool. It was a symbol of prosperity and progress that appeared in the middle of the century. The principle of its operation was simple. A huge block of ice was placed in the upper compartment, lined with zinc or lead. The ice melted, and the cold air descended into the compartment for food, cooling it. The meltwater drained into a special tray, which had to be emptied in a timely manner. Ice delivery was a separate business. Ice was harvested in winter from lakes and rivers, cut into huge blocks, and stored in special ice houses, covered with sawdust. The Iceman, or ice delivery man, was a common sight on Victorian streets. He brought heavy blocks of ice right to the kitchen, and it was an expensive pleasure. The presence of an ice box radically changed the menu. It allowed fresh meat and fish to be stored for a day or two longer. It paved the way for new desserts, ice cream, cold mousses, and jellies, which became incredibly popular at dinner parties. The icebox was not just a convenience, but a tool that allowed the cook to demonstrate her skills. In addition to the pantry and icebox, there were other methods of preservation. Salting, smoking, and drying meat and fish were old, proven methods. Vegetables and fruits were preserved in sugar or vinegar. Jams, marinades, and pickles were made. These preparations filled all the shelves in the pantries and formed the basis of the winter diet. The smells of the pantry were special. It was a mixture of the aromas of dried herbs, spices, smoked meats, the freshness of stone, and the slight smell of dampness from the basement. The cook knew every nuance of this smell. Any change, the appearance of a sour or rotten note, was an alarm signal. It was necessary to immediately find and dispose of the spoiled product. Thus, inventory management was a complex logistical task. The cook had to know exactly what she had and in what quantities, what needed to be ordered and what needed to be used immediately before it spoiled. The pantry and ice house were her tools in the eternal race against time and nature. Guess how long it took to prepare a simple dinner in the Victorian era? The answer may shock you. In a world without semi-prepared foods, canned sauces, and pre-cut vegetables, every single ingredient had to be prepared by hand. This process was not just long, it was endless and accounted for the lion's share of all the work in the kitchen. Forget about going to the supermarket. Food was brought in its raw form. Meat was delivered in whole carcasses or large pieces, which the cook or his assistant had to cut up. This required knowledge of anatomy and a set of sharp knives and cleavers. Every piece was put to use. Bones were used to make broth, and fat was rendered for cooking. Vegetables arrived straight from the garden, covered in soil. Each potato tuber and each carrot had to be thoroughly washed in cold water, peeled and chopped. And cutting was an art in itself. Different dishes required cubes, strips, or slices of a strictly defined size. This monotonous work took hours and was usually done by the younger servants. Bread was baked every day. There were no bread machines. The flour was sifted by hand. The dough was kneaded in huge wooden or ceramic vats. It was hard physical work that required strong hands. The dough had to be kneaded for a long time, then left to rise in a warm place near the stove, kneaded again, and left to rise again before being placed in a hot oven. Even simple things like spices required preparation. Sugar was not supplied in the form of granules, but in the form of solid conical heads. To obtain granulated sugar, pieces had to be broken off from these heads with special tongs and then ground in a heavy marble mortar. The same applied to pepper, cinnamon, and other spices. They were bought in the form of peas, sticks, or grains and ground by hand. Making desserts was the pinnacle of culinary art and required incredible patience. Eggs for biscuits or meringues were beaten by hand with a whisk made of twigs. This sometimes took up to half an hour of continuous work. Cream was whipped in the same way. Gelatin, which we now buy in powder or sheet form, was obtained by boiling calf's feet for hours. Nuts, such as almonds, had to be blanched in boiling water, and then each nut had to be peeled by hand. Raisins and currants for puddings were sorted, removing twigs and debris. It was painstaking, almost meditative work, ideal for long winter evenings by the light of a dim lamp. All sauces were made from scratch. There were no bouillon cubes. The basis for most sauces was broth, which was simmered for hours or even days over low heat. The cook had to constantly skim off the foam and fat to achieve perfect clarity and flavor. Preparing a classic French sauce was a complex chemical process that required precision and attention. Even serving drinks was a big deal. Tea and coffee did not come in bags or capsules. Tea leaves were brewed in a teapot, and coffee beans were roasted and ground just before preparation to achieve maximum aroma. The water for this was boiled in special kettles on the stove. This endless cycle of preparation turned the kitchen into a beehive where there was never a moment of downtime. From the moment the servants woke up until the moment they collapsed from exhaustion, their hands were constantly busy, cleaning, cutting, whisking, grinding. Every meal was the result of many hours of this invisible but vital labor. In the next chapter, you will learn how they managed to maintain at least a semblance of cleanliness in this organized chaos. Imagine a room where coal is constantly burning, water is boiling, and grease is frying. Imagine that all this happens 16 hours a day. Now you can roughly understand what the main enemy was in the Victorian kitchen. That enemy was dirt, ubiquitous, sticky, and almost invincible. Cleaning here was not just a task, but a total, endless war. The main source of dirt was, of course, the coal stove. It emitted myriads of tiny soot particles into the air. This soot settled on everything: walls, ceilings, dishes, and clothing. It mixed with cooking steam and grease to form a sticky, dark film. That is why kitchen walls and ceilings were often painted with dark, stain-resistant paint. The fight against this coating was a daily one. Ceilings and walls were washed regularly, but the main ritual was the daily cleaning of the stove itself. As we have already mentioned, its blacking, polishing with graphite wax, was mandatory. This not only gave the stove a neat appearance, but also protected the cast iron from rust. The hands of the maid who did this work were almost always black from the ingrained graphite. The second battlefield was the dishes. We have already mentioned the difficulty of cleaning cast iron, but grease was everywhere. The huge pans used to fry meat had to be washed in hot water with caustic alkaline soap. There were no products that could dissolve grease in an instant. Hard brushes, sand, and pure physical strength were used. Copper cookware required a separate approach. It was the pride of the kitchen, but only as long as it sparkled. Servants spent hours polishing every saucepan and every mold. A mixture of vinegar and salt, lemon juice, fine sand, or a special powder. Everything was used to make the copper shine. This was not only a matter of cleanliness, but also of status. Dull copper was a sign of lazy servants and a poor housekeeper. Kitchen floors were another problem. They were usually made of stone slabs or tiles, materials that were durable and non-flammable. But dirt and grease got stuck in the joints between the slabs. These floors could not simply be wiped with a mop. They had to be scraped. Servants would kneel down with stiff brushes and buckets of hot soapy water and literally scrape the dirt away inch by inch. Cutting tables, usually made of thick wood, also required special care. Raw meat and fish were cut on them, and dough was kneaded. To keep them hygienic, they were scraped clean with knives and then sprinkled with salt to draw out moisture and odors. Sometimes they were washed with hot lye. Wood absorbed odors, and combating them was a constant struggle. Sinks, often made of stone or lead, quickly became covered with a greasy film. They had to be cleaned with sand and lye. Drain pipes were primitive and often clogged. Cleaning drains was one of the most unpleasant but necessary chores. Quite aggressive cleaning agents were used for all this cleaning. The main weapon was alkaline soap, which was made from animal fat and lye, caustic soda. It was excellent at removing grease, but it was incredibly harsh on the hands. Soda, vinegar, sand, crushed brick. These were all abrasives and chemicals that servants used on a daily basis. There were little tricks in this constant battle for cleanliness. For example, to prevent kitchen utensils from smelling like fish or onions, they were wiped with half a lemon. To scare away unwanted guests, floors were washed with carbolic acid or sprinkled with borax in the corners. This obsession with cleanliness was not just a matter of aesthetics. In an era before antibiotics and a clear understanding of microbiology, spoiled food or dirt could have serious consequences for the health of the entire family. Therefore, the cook monitored cleanliness as strictly as she monitored the quality of the food. The kitchen was a battlefield where hygiene was the main weapon. Close your eyes and imagine you are entering a Victorian kitchen. What do you smell? The smell would not be simple and unambiguous, like in a modern kitchen, where you only smell coffee or baking. The aroma of a Victorian kitchen is a complex, multi-layered symphony where pleasant notes mix with sharp and sometimes even repulsive ones. It was the smell of hard work. The basic, pervasive note was, of course, the smell of a coal stove, a light but constant aroma of sulfur from burning coal, mixed with the smell of soot and hot cast iron. Added to this was the smoke from the fire, the smell of burning wood and paper. This smoky background was always present in the kitchen, permeating the walls, clothes, and even the hair of those who worked there. The aromas of food being prepared were superimposed on this background. They changed throughout the day. In the morning, it was the smell of baking bread. Warm, satisfying, one of the most pleasant in the kitchen. Added to this was the smell of frying bacon or boiling oatmeal. It was the smell of the beginning of the day, the promise of a hearty breakfast. In the afternoon, the symphony became more complex. Preparations began for the main meal of the day, lunch. The air was filled with the smell of boiling broth, which had been simmering for hours from bones and vegetables. There was a sharp but appetizing smell of roasting meat. If the owners were wealthy, it could be the smell of a large roast beef sizzling on a spit over an open fire. At the same time, the kitchen smelled of vegetables. There was a strong, earthy smell of potatoes and carrots being peeled. There was also the sharp, tear-inducing smell of onions, which were being chopped in huge quantities. The aroma of boiling cabbage was not the most pleasant, but it was very characteristic of that time. It mixed with the steam and lingered under the ceiling for a long time. There were also sweet notes. When the cook baked a pie, the kitchen was filled with the aroma of hot apples and cinnamon. The smell of boiling jam, thick, berry, sweet, was one of the most desirable. The aroma of spices that were ground by hand was strong and concentrated. Cloves, nutmeg, ginger. But there were other smells, less appetizing. These were the smells of cleaning and hygiene. The sharp chemical smell of alkaline soap, which was used to wash dishes and floors. The pungent smell of vinegar or carbolic acid, used for disinfection. The smell of stove polish, a mixture of graphite and grease. And of course, the smell of polish for copper and silver. On laundry day, one smell dominated: the smell of boiling laundry. It was a mixture of hot steam, soapy lye, and wet fabric. This thick, damp, heavy smell filled the entire space, making the air almost unbreathable. The pantry added its own notes. From there came the spicy aroma of smoked hams hanging on hooks, the smell of dried herbs, thyme, rosemary, lavender, and the light, cool, slightly damp smell of stone slabs and stored vegetables. All these aromas did not exist separately. They blended into one complex, thick broth. It was the smell of life and hard work. It was so strong and pungent that it lingered on the servants' clothes and skin even after they left the kitchen. Entering a Victorian kitchen meant being immediately overwhelmed by this powerful wave of smells. The modern kitchen strives for minimalism. One knife for everything, one frying pan, one blender. The Victorian kitchen was the complete opposite. It was a realm of hyper-specialization. Victorians believed that there should be a specific tool for every task, even the most insignificant. As a result, the kitchen arsenal was enormous and resembled an alchemist's laboratory. This obsession with specialization began with knives. There was no such thing as a chef's knife. There was a knife for cutting meat, a knife for filleting fish, a knife for bread, a small knife for peeling vegetables, and a curved knife for coring apples. There was a specific blade for each type of product, and the cook strictly ensured that they were used for their intended purpose. The preparation of desserts and baked goods was the apogee of this mania. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of types of molds. Copper molds for jellies and puddings had incredibly complex designs, in the form of towers, fruits, and shells. There were special molds for cookies, cupcakes, and pies. Pies, by the way, required special tubes, ceramic figures that were inserted into the center to allow steam to escape and keep the crust crispy. Even for simple tasks such as whisking, there were several tools: a heavy wire whisk for beating egg whites, a more durable flat whisk for sauces, and a special broom made of wooden sticks, which was considered the best for some types of dough. Each of them required long and tedious work with your hands. Let's move on to gadgets. Yes, the Victorian era had its own gadgets. One of the most impressive was the spit jack, a mechanism for rotating a spit. Early versions were powered by weights, like in a clock. Later, spring mechanisms appeared. This device allowed large pieces of meat to be roasted evenly over the fire, freeing the servant from having to sit and turn the handle for hours. For sugar, which was sold in solid heads, there were special tongs called nippers. They worked like pliers, breaking off pieces of the desired size. These pieces were then crushed in a mortar. It was a difficult and imprecise process until granulated sugar appeared. There were also smaller but no less important tools. A potato press for making mashed potatoes, hand-operated meat grinders that were attached to the edge of the table, special spoons with holes for removing vegetables from broth, fish spatulas, graters with different types of blades. This huge arsenal had to be stored somewhere. Kitchen walls were often covered with shelves and hooks on which utensils hung. This was not only practical, everything was at hand, but also served as a demonstration of wealth and order. The gleaming copper cookware and rows of knives were a source of pride. Caring for all these tools was a separate task. Knives had to be sharpened regularly on a special stone. Wooden spoons and boards had to be scraped. Metal meat grinders had to be disassembled, washed and lubricated to prevent rust. Each item required attention and care. This specialization was not just a whim. It reflected the complexity of cooking at the time. The recipes in cookbooks were incredibly complex, requiring precision and multi-step preparation. Without the right tools, it was impossible to make clear broth or whipped mousse according to the rules. Thus, the Victorian kitchen was not just a place, but an entire system where each item had its own specific purpose. It was a world where order, precision, and the right tool for the right job were valued. The kitchen was not just a production workshop. In large houses, it was the center of a whole world that existed below the stairs. It was a world of servants with its own rules, joys, sorrows, and strict social structure. While the owners lived in luxurious rooms upstairs, real life was bustling here, downstairs. The kitchen was the warmest and often the liveliest place in the house. It was here, at the large wooden table, that the servants themselves often ate. It was their space, away from the watchful eyes of their masters. Here they could relax a little, exchange news and rumors. The cook, as the head of this world, presided at the table. However, hierarchy reigned here as well. The senior servants, the butler, the housekeeper, the cook, sat at the head of the table and received the best food. The junior servants, dishwashers, footmen, sat at the edge and ate what was left. Conversations were conducted in hushed tones, and the younger servants did not dare to speak until addressed by their elders. It was the same world as upstairs, only in miniature. The working day was incredibly long, sometimes up to 16-18 hours. The servants had almost no personal time. They lived where they worked, often in tiny rooms in the attic or basement. The kitchen was their workplace, their dining room, and their living room. They had 1, rarely 2, days off per month. It was a closed, almost claustrophobic environment. The rules of conduct were extremely strict. Any familiarity with the owners or guests was unthinkable. Servants were required to be invisible. They had to do their work without being seen or making unnecessary noise. Silence and order were also required in the kitchen. The cook did not tolerate idle chatter or laughter during work. Despite the harsh conditions, this secluded life had its advantages. It gave a sense of community, of belonging to the family of servants. They worked together, ate together, and celebrated holidays together, when possible. Older servants often taught younger ones, passing on their skills. For many, this was the only family they knew. The kitchen was also a hub of information. Merchants who brought food were the main source of news from the outside world. Footmen who served at the master's table brought down snippets of conversations they overheard. The kitchen knew all the secrets of the house, both those of the masters and those of the other servants. It was a world of hard work, but also a world of order. Everyone knew their place and their duties. This routine, however exhausting, gave life structure and meaning. Accomplishing a difficult task, such as hosting a perfect dinner party, was a source of professional pride for the entire team. For the owners of the house, the kitchen was something of a black box. They ordered food and received it on beautiful plates. They rarely went downstairs and had no idea of the titanic effort behind each dish. This world of soot, steam, heavy cast iron, and human endurance was hidden from their eyes, but it was the foundation on which the well-being of the home rested. We have looked behind the grand facade of the Victorian era and seen its beating heart, the kitchen. It was a place of striking contrasts. It was a factory powered by coal and sweat, where people worked in conditions that seem unimaginable to us today. But at the same time, it was a laboratory where culinary masterpieces were born, and a home where a life hidden from prying eyes was lived. Cast iron stoves, heavy pots, endless cleaning, and fighting for every sip of hot water, all this was a daily reality. The romantic image of a kitchen with a rosy-cheeked hostess at the stove is shattered by the reality of soot, heat, and exhausting labor. But it was precisely this labor that was the invisible force that drove the entire complex mechanism of the Victorian home. What other topics from the past would you like us to explore? Perhaps you are interested in the medicine of the time or how cities were built? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our new journeys into the past.